Lots going on in the UK at the moment, as you know. What's going to happen to game shooting this autumn? What about the country fairs? What's happening in Scotland? I'm going to be talking to loads of people via all kinds of different technology. First up, it's Chris Horne from the game shooting portal GunsOnPegs.com. How are shoots reacting? Shoots which are going to take place at the end of this year, how are they reacting at the moment?
Yeah, so this is just crunch time right now. So basically between now and mid-April, I'd say, is the latest point that shoots can really make this decision. And it's basically one big vicious circle. So although the game farmers have tightened up their terms from, what they require from shoots, because they obviously don't want to be left with a bad debt, the shoots are obviously having to ask the guns for the money, and naturally the guns are hesitating because it's a pretty awful bet to make, to be putting thousands of pounds worth down now when the upside is a fun day out, the downside is losing the whole lot. And it's just, understandably, people are not wanting to necessarily take that risk at this stage. However, I don't know about you, but this isolation, this sort of lockdown we have at the moment, it's going to pass, right? And if you look at what other countries are up to, you can see that it's probably going to pass quite a long way before the season. However, if you are in any doubt, you wouldn't be parting with thousands of pounds. Digby, our shoot account manager, has been doing some stats on this, and I've got a few stats here. So he's spoken to 132 shoots since last Tuesday. And of those, 27 are definitely shooting, 31 are definitely mothballing, as in that they're going to, for 12 months, just start again next season. And 74 are yet to make up their minds between now and 2 weeks. So we're going to know a lot more then. But I don't know. In 2008, when GunsOnPegs started, loads of shoots had spare availability. That's because it wasn't sprung upon them in such speed like this is now.
Looking back to 2001 and Foot and Mouth, that was a good example of a season where the rug was pulled from underneath us. We got a bit more notice this time. You also sell insurance to shooters. Has the insurance premium gone up? Is that becoming more difficult?
So there's barely a policy out there that will cover you against the lockdown. Some businesses have those policies, not something that we sell, and you certainly won't find an insurer right now who will obviously sell that to you. What we sell is effectively a travel policy. So if you're ill, like if you have coronavirus, then at the moment, and I'll say that right now, at the moment, it's covered. But it won't cover a shoot that cannot take place because we're not allowed out of our homes.
There's not much game shooting taking place at the moment, so
yeah, well, exactly.
Doesn't really apply. Okay. So you're painting a sort of relatively gloomy picture. I mean, just kind of being optimistic for a second. If everything is sorted out, if we're not in any kind of lockdown of any kind by the beginning of the shooting season on the glorious 12th of August, are those shoots that are still open going to clean up, do you think?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, we see it every year on the website. Our busiest months shouldn't be when they are. Our busiest months are October, November, December. Now, in theory, everyone should be sorted by then. But it's the same every year, and it always has been. Now, the reason that is because once people go out on one day, then they absolutely love it and they want more. So they'll try and find it. Now, what used to happen back in the day is that shoots would just predict their bookings and then put down the number of appropriate birds for their bookings at that point. Because the world has changed so much, over the last sort of 10 years, shoots have just put down what they believe they can sell, and effectively carrying risk that they can then sell those days over the coming months. Now, obviously right now, I mean, now would be the time to do that. If you believe that we're going to have a normal season where people are out and about and able to spend time together within 2 meters of each other, that's basically the situation that I think will happen. And so if you are putting down birds, people are going to be wanting to shoot with you left, right and centre.
Thanks, Chris. I also chatted to someone who's not cancelling this year. It's deerstalking guide and gamekeeper Paul Childerley.
It's been a very difficult time in both aspects, really. With the deerstalking, we obviously, when the first part of it kicked off, all the foreign clients cancelled, and then which I managed to, with the help from yourself, we booked it up with a lot of English guys to do the culling. So we got a large number to obviously take off at the end of the season. But obviously with the lockdown on Tuesday, I have to cancel all those as well. Which for me, to be honest with you, I like a few extra deer around. That's not a problem at all. But the main problem is the farming. They obviously got the commercial crops with the wheat and the barley and bits and pieces, but we grow a lot of onions as well and potatoes, and they just set the onions, and these beds of like smooth, perfect onions just about coming through. You got 30 Chinese water deer on there, causing havoc. So we've had to go out and basically we're still having to go out and try and do a bit of culling and manage the population to get them so everyone's happy.
Yeah, you got to do that. Looking further ahead, is there going to be any problems getting a hold of poults for next season?
Just speaking to my suppliers, they're talking that the eggs are coming into the country fine at the moment, and they plan to carry on as they have been. But it just depends on what orders they get, because a lot of the bigger commercial shoots have basically put it on hold for a year. For the whole season, basically. Spoke to quite a few keepers across the country that are slightly smaller private shoots with a few let days. They've cut back to 80-50%. Quite a few have shut down totally. So I think probably the gist of it at the moment is the ones that can will, like myself, it's my only business. I haven't got the farm and everything else. Well, quite a few of the other estates have. We'll probably just try and get through the season so we can obviously pay the keepers and keep it going and try and just get it through to the following season.
Well, these are quite significant income streams for farms. I mean, shoots, they don't make very much money, but they turn over a lot of money. And also, having a gamekeeper allows you to keep an eye on parts of the farm your agricultural workers probably wouldn't look at. Why are people closing down? Is it lack of demand? Are people cancelling shoots months ahead?
This is the unknown, basically. So it's a massive outlay right from the beginning of the year. Basically, the season starts now for anyone who runs a shoot. You've got the game crop planning. You obviously got the birds, the eggs, right the way through. So basically, you have to deposit for the birds coming in for the end of the season if you don't rear your own. Then you've got land rent, and you got all the other bits and pieces that go along with it. But
you can do it.
Do what?
You're going ahead. You're going ahead with your shoot. Why can't other people go ahead with their shoots?
It's a big risk. I haven't got I haven't got a farm I can just offset everything onto. So, to be totally honest with you, what I'm doing is carrying on, but with a view to see how the next 2 or 3 weeks go, because. So I've obviously outlaid for certain things already. I've committed with the game farmers, but we're still in talks whether it is 100%. So I'm still basically the next 2 weeks will be the biggest telltale sign across the country.
The situation in Scotland is made more complicated by the Scottish government. Here is Niall Rowantree from Ardnamurchan.
Well, I mean, obviously isolation or self-isolation is less of a challenge for us than it is for people that are living in urban and built-up areas. And as a family, our heart goes out to people at the moment, who are trying to isolate and keep young kids at home and look after older people. But here the challenge is that if we do have a problem health-wise here, it is such a remote place. So everybody here in this rural part of the Highlands is taking it really seriously, Charlie.
People are saying down here that the Highlands is pretty well closed, that the police are kind of cutting off the main routes into remoter parts of the Highlands because there's this fear that camper vans will head out from Glasgow and Edinburgh.
Well, certainly Thursday, Friday last week, all of a sudden there was a huge influx of exactly that. There were camper vans. I mean, actually parked up one evening on the estate, we had 11 different camper vans. And we noticed that over the weekend that there was a steady increase, and then as you've seen yourself with the media and with government response, the concern was, it's not that people don't want folk to come to the Highlands, it's just now wasn't the right time. And because we have limited resources and NHS Highland has only got so many beds and so many ventilators, everybody got quite worried that if there was an increased problem up here, we just couldn't cope with it.
From a shooting point of view, I mean, you operate an international stalking business. What's happening there?
We've certainly had some losses. All of our spring roe deer stalking is gone, but we'd suspected 2 or 3 weeks ago that was going to go, and there will really be no commercial roe deer stalking in the Highlands, or probably in the whole of Scotland this year. So that's been the first losses. The biggest concern that we have is that as a business and a lot of my colleagues, the people are either self-employed or they're part-time employed, and this is the first sort of wave of income of the sporting year, so it's caused a great deal of alarm and concern. And the people use terms, and maybe it's not the right time now to talk about public goods, but certainly a lot of crop protection and spring browsing impacts from deer will slip through the net this year. So economically and environmentally, we're going to get hit from both sides, I think.
It seems from looking at the news down here in Scotland that the Scottish Government is using coronavirus as something of a stick to beat shooting businesses with.
Well, I don't know. I mean, my own opinion is that we live in unprecedented times, and I think civil servants, politicians, nobody's quite sure what the right thing is to do here, and I'm sure to an awful lot of society, what's my bread and butter and your bread and butter isn't a high priority for them. I know it's not just shooting and deer stalking or deer forests that are going to be hit by this. An awful lot of people who rely on holiday cottages, caravans, these sort of things.
Am I right in thinking that there's a ban on people bringing their guns into Scotland for the rest of the year, the whole of the rest of the year?
Well, certainly guidance has come out from Police Scotland is suggested, and we can understand why. That they're putting all of their resources to frontline policing, and they've put out advice to people on renewal of their firearm certificates, on people that are making applications, and there was blanket guidance came out that any visitor permit applications sent in would be returned. So it looks to us at the moment from Police Scotland guidelines that there will be no visitor permits issued for Scotland in 2020.
I mean, is that because they're putting firearms inquiry officers out into the front line of policing? Is that what they're really doing?
Well, I think, I mean, certainly the guidance that they're giving us, and we've got to take them at face value, is that they're redeploying both administrative and operational staff to deal with COVID-19 and everything that comes from it. So, I mean, the statement is pretty clear that they're redirecting resources. I don't think it's anti-shooting, it's just that with the priorities they've got, visitor permits are very far down the list. But economically to us, it'll have a huge implication, because a lot of people do use estate rifles, and a lot of people like to bring their own. And those who have booked with us this year, and I'm sure many other Highland estates, who are insistent on bringing their own firearms, those bookings will now be lost to us.
And how about this, the news out this, I think it was out today or earlier this week, that the Scottish Government is going to not pay out coronavirus compensation to any business that is involved in shooting in any way?
It's a negative suggestion if that does become the case, because as I said before, there are public goods here, and before all of the corona thing kicked off, you and I were talking at some length about what was going to be expected of farmers, land managers, and we had very big government headline figures of new forestry and planting new trees, and deer management is going to be very, very important to that. And the way that we economically offset it is going to be hugely important. I mean, we've got a situation, for example, at the moment that the government have paid contractors to shoot deer on the public estate, which has cost the taxpayer a lot of money, and now that's been suspended too. So the chances are that deer populations are going to grow rapidly, and they need to support these public goods by supporting our businesses. For me personally, as a wildlife manager and a deer manager, and for my wife who runs a wildlife tourism business up here in the Highlands, our heart goes out to our fellow citizens north and south of the border. We'd like to wish them and their families all the best in this crisis, and when it's possible, we look forward to seeing them back with us in the Highlands again, and we hope that they all take care.
Now, what's BASC been up to? Garry Doolan is their head of media.
Well, you can see that I'm working from a shed with a log burner in the background. So all of us at BASC are working from home now in the main office and the regions. It's taken a few days to get used to. but we're still trying to sort of do business as normal as best we can. So there's obviously quite a lot going on at the moment, still with wild justice and releasing and general licenses and obviously COVID on top now. So it's a busy time, but we're making do as best we can.
Well, it's a huge year for shooting, but surely all that Chris Packham stuff must have gone away. I mean, surely while he's self-isolating, at least he can't do any damage to us.
I think the real disappointment last week, wasn't it, was that we had the real start of the coronavirus stuff and everybody looking at social distancing and having to not go into work and work from home, and they announced that they were going to challenge the for the judicial review in Wales. And it was it sort of completely missed the mood of the nation, I felt, and they were asking for crowdfunding. I think maybe that backfired a little bit. But, the other things, we've been back in legal sort of discussions this week around some of the wild justice stuff, and we've had the game bird releasing. Wild Justice have decided not to try and expedite that particular challenge this year. So that's some good news, I suppose.
That was to sort of speed it up, wasn't it? They were going to try and speed it up so it actually affected shooting this year.
Yeah, I think their argument was that it needed to be dealt with by the court now, and our argument was, well, the rural calendar, if you like, doesn't work to the same calendar as the judicial system, and people now, regardless of coronavirus, people are working really hard in the countryside to manage the landscape now and for the next few months ahead, and we needed to take decisions for now, not for 3 or 4 months down the line. So that's good news, and it's a pragmatic response from Wild Justice, and it just means that wherever we end up in the next 3 or 4 months with coronavirus, the releasing can go ahead for this year, which gives people some degree of certainty at least.
Okay, I was going to ask you, I mean, are you at BASC pretty happy or pretty disappointed with the way that the countryside community, shooting community, has reacted to coronavirus?
I think it's like every other community. People are just trying to get their heads around what all this means. So, I'm flippant and I'm working in my shed, but that takes a bit of getting used to, and it's no different to anybody else in any other walk of life. And I've been really buoyed. I mean, there was something last week, the game packs that were on the Game for the Table Facebook group, being prepared to send people out 14 days worth of pre-prepared game meat was, I thought, an amazing thing. We've just published a blog today on behalf of the Gamekeepers Welfare Trust and the work that they're doing this weekend and the phone calls they've taken. There's people are really fearing for, not only fearing for the health at the moment, but fearing for what's coming down the line in 2, 3, 4, 5 months. And as much as we want to say that we hope it's business as usual, once we head into towards the sort of the main chunk of the season, the reality is there are going to be some real challenges for people, and we won't know the full scale of those for weeks and months yet, and we just have to be as best prepared we can. And it's interesting with this blog. It's the Gamekeepers blog. They're talking about this year on top of the whole general license thing at the same time last year. So that's 2 really challenging years for people. But it's good to see that the likes of the Gamekeepers Welfare Trust are out there, are supporting people, and are reporting that they're getting support from the shooting community. So it's really good to see that people are pulling together and trying to support those who are in vulnerable situations, really.
Firearms licensing, I imagine that's ground to a halt. What's happening there?
So I think there's 2 things we're looking at this week. We tried to get answers on. So firstly is the whole whether you can even go out and shoot, and we're still chasing DEFRA. We're still trying to get some real clarity from them. We've put out a statement that says, you shouldn't be going out unless it's absolutely essential. However, pest control at this time of the year is essential for food production and essential for the protection of livestock. So we've sent some information to DEFRA, and I've seen that this morning, and we're asking them to just give us some clarity on, and if they agree with our take on this. And we're not alone in having problems. I've seen that the Angling Trust have put information out, and some of the horse groups have put information out. So lots of us, the Prime Minister was very clear, and he said you should only go out for exercise, which was walking, running and cycling. And he gave those examples, but there's a lot more that people will feel they need to go out for. So we're trying to make sure that our members are protected if they do choose to go out and that they take that decision. But then we've got the firearms licensing thing on top, and nobody is expecting that the police can run to normal capacity at the moment. But we're seeing lots of different approaches from different forces, and the general scale of it, the general position seems to be that they're only doing renewals, they're not doing grants, and we're trying to pin that down with each force. So as we get the information in, we're putting it up on our website, and we've got a dedicated coronavirus page, and the firearms licensing information comes within that. So we're trying to keep people abreast of all that, but we're also trying to get a sort of a national picture and getting some clarity and getting a national decision, if you like, so the forces are all doing the same thing at the same time. And on top of the police forces, if that's not difficult enough, clearly, GPs, to try and get an appointment with your GP now on anything other than the obvious is really difficult.
If you're trying to bring up firearms licensing at a time when GPs really should be doing other stuff, it seems a little bit trivial, doesn't it?
It does, but if you need your license because you need your guns to earn a living, or the farmer that you have the relationship with, is suddenly getting battered by whatever's damaging his crops or his livestock, then it's important, isn't it? And while we accept that there are some real priorities, and clearly the hospitals and the NHS are doing an amazing job, equally we still have a work to do in the countryside, and that doesn't stop because the world is suffering from coronavirus. So it's a delicate balance. We're not trying to upset people, but at the same time we're trying to get the job done for our members in the wider shooting community.
So how about pest control and deer stalking? Well, there's all kinds of advice going on around the UK at the moment. The government seems to be a bit muddled about it. We reckon if you want an answer, ring up your Firearms Inquiry Officer, your FEO, because they are the ones who are going to be making the decision if you get into trouble about whether or not to remove your FAC or your shotgun certificate. And there's quite a lot of mixed messages from them. Kent says you can't go recreational deer stalking, you can't have one for the pot, but if you're a professional pest controller you can go out. If you're a landowner protecting your crops against deer, that's fine. Lancashire says no to deer stalking. Lots of professional deer stalking companies have cancelled deer stalking across the UK. Lancashire basically says you can go fox shooting, but don't get caught is their, I suppose, unofficial advice, but it's quite sensible. Kent actually says if you ring them 101, get yourself an incident number if you're going to go out, then that's fine. Devon says nobody can go out unless they're a landowner or a gamekeeper. So broadly speaking, the advice is if you're a professional, you can go out as part of your daily duties. It's food production. It could be said to be essential. If you're recreational, if you're one for the pot, then you can't. Next, we work with a company called Shooter King, which is a clothing company, and it has found 500 protective suits from its factories it uses in China, which the NHS desperately need. The UK government is not providing enough protection for NHS workers. The only problem is the carriage cost. They've got 13 big boxes in China with these suits in them. They need to raise 2,000 quid to pay the DHL bill. So we've set up a GoFundMe page if you can help, and it's not an easy time. I appreciate that, and it's certainly not compulsory, but if you can help, please pop down and have a look at the link in the description, and that will take you to the GoFundMe page. And then there's countryside events. Countryside events which have been moving around because of the virus, particularly the game fair was going to be at the end of July, now landed on the 18th, 19th and 20th of September, which is the same weekend as the Countryman Show in Manchester, which we're going to, and the Our Countryside Rocks show in Shropshire, which is a sort of countryside lifestyle show. So why have they done that? Their answer is because that is the only date that Ragley Hall, which is where they're holding it, can give them. However, I spoke to John Allison, who runs the British Shooting Show at the NEC, who's also running the Countryman Show at Manchester, and he's a bit baffled.
Well, the news has just come through. How do we feel? Well, I think it's sort of it was an interesting move, and I have to say I don't know the reasons why they've done that. But more importantly, we've had quite a few people phoning up that are a little bit disgruntled, if I'm being honest with you. If we look at the Manchester show, that's been set in stone for a long time now. People committed to it. marketing budget's been set and advertising, then all of a sudden we're now getting phone calls from people saying that they've committed to 2 events, and now they're basically double booked. And as we both know, Charlie, there's only so many staff these companies have, and then all of a sudden they're now committed to same weekend with other shows running at the same time.
So you're very different shows. I mean, you're in a shed. It's the same model as the British Shooting Show at the NEC. They're in an outdoor park setting, but you have got the same, well, some of the same standholders, haven't you?
Yeah, absolutely, and I think this is one of the things that's come about. Is 1 or 2 of the standholders have been on the phone today, saying where do they stand.
Just tell me a little bit about what you've got planned for the Manchester show in September.
The Manchester show is really interesting because, needless to say, it's the majority of the show is all about the shooting industry, which stems off the back of our British Shooting Show, which is extremely well established now. But we've also got other elements that we've brought into it, which is our fly fishing side of things. And what's going to be new for us is a fly fishing experience with fly fishing pools and people doing demonstrations, along with the ever popular display areas that we have with the likes of Chris Green and Andy Cullen fulfilling those aspects of it, and the likes of Ralph Skipek doing the cooking demonstrations. So a true countryside experience, and very much looking forward to it, I have to say.
That's it. If you are one of our 600 YouTube members, Patreon supporters, shareholders, you'll hear from me on my Tuesday evening vlog, and you can find out how to join that happy team in the description below. There's a link there. If not, if you are simply a viewer of Field Sports Britain, well, we look forward to seeing you at 7 p.m. UK time on Wednesday for Field Sports Britain. I'll see you then.